What is going on, guys? It is Trifecta J here with a recruiting update for the Washington State Dynasty Season 2 of the Dynasty. As we've reached the halfway point of the season, we are 5-2 at the moment, coming off a loss to Arizona, looking to rebound at home against the Cal Golden Bears. This is a team that has had a very surprising year to some, as we only have 2 losses, but we're upcoming. We have some very tough opponents in Oregon, Washington, and a couple of other Pac-12 teams. This is also a team that is graduating a good bit of players. 17 players are graduating. A lot of them are very key. For the recruiting side, we have one commitment already, and that is Vince McGill. I showed him in the last episode. Not the greatest guy, only a 1-star kicker, but he will be our starter day 1, or next year for day 1, and should be a very nice piece. Now, a breakdown of this roster. At quarterback, we have 4 underclassmen on this roster. We have 2 players who are redshirting right now, as they were recruited last year, and with that, we do not have any recruits. We are not looking at any. Next year, we might start to look at some to replace Luke Falk if the other prospects don't develop quite as I wanted them to. At running back, this is probably one of the biggest strengths of our team, as we have 2 players who are on pace for 1,000-yard years each. Between them are on their own. That's incredibly impressive. The rest of our team, we have 5 underclassmen, and with that, we are not looking at any players. We have 2 players redshirting from last year's recruiting class, so that should be definitely a position that continues to develop. A lot of nice talent at wide receiver, as our top 2 wide receivers though are graduating in Gabe Marks and Dom Williams. Richie Wiley, one guy to keep your eye on, as he was one of our recruits last year. He is the only guy next year who will have any size. Speaking of size, Robert Lundy at 6'5", a 3-star wide receiver. He is a big wide receiver who actually has some very nice speed, a really good route runner, can go up and get the ball, and makes the spectacular catches that you want to see out of your receivers. Not much after the catch though. Melvin Hall, a 4-star wide receiver out of South Dakota. He could definitely be a guy next year who might even see a little playing time if he does not redshirt. He does a great job of getting off of the line, but he does struggle with catching the ball. On the other hand though, he does run very nice routes, so that'll be something to keep your eye on. A couple of other guys that we are targeting: Alton Thomas, a 5'11" wide receiver out of Georgia who has some nice speed, and Demetrius Bennett, another sort of slot receiver type of guy with some nice speed. At tackle, we have Joe Dahl and Martin Woodard. Both are our starters, and that is a really good 1-2 punch on the outside, but Joe Dahl will be graduating, so Martin Woodard will move to the left tackle spot. And at right tackle, we have 2 guys in Sam Floor and Andre Dillard who could be very suitable replacements. Recruiting wise, we have Marcus Mann, a 6'7" tackle at 299 pounds out of Kentucky. He moves pretty well for his size. He's much better in pass protection and can really hold his blocks in pass protection, and he's a very strong 18-year-old. Eric Malone, another really tall guy at 6'8", should be a very nice piece. And Tom Mullins, another guy not quite as tall as the first 2, but could be a nice piece if Marcus Mann ends up not committing. Moving to the interior of the line, at guard, we only have 4 on the roster, and 2 of them are graduating. So the number 1 focus is we have got to get depth. The starters for next year are probably locked up in Eduardo Middleton, and Timothy Love might get the start at left guard. At our recruits that we're looking at is Brandon Landry. We're actually losing right now to Hawaii. He's a 6'6" prospect, so another guy with a nice bit of size. He moves very well, much better in run block, and is okay at holding his blocks. He's a pretty strong guy as well. Another guy we're looking at, this is more of the top guy, 6'5", a little undersized at 266, is Clayton Little. He's from Kansas, and he is a gem prospect. Really good for a freshman coming in at run blocking, and incredibly strong also for an 18-year-old. Another guy we're looking at is Sam Graham, only 6'3", a 2-star prospect. Another guy out of Kansas, but just sort of a backup guy. At center, we have Riley Sorensen and Carlos Freeman. As for the next 2 years, this position is pretty much locked down, as Sorensen will return and then Freeman will replace him. And a guy to develop behind them is Luke Woods. He will redshirt and likely sit for a couple of years, a 6'1" center. He gets off the line very well, a very balanced blocker who has some nice strength to him and can really hold his blocks very well. Now to the defensive side of the ball, Our defensive line is one of our biggest strengths. We've got nice pressure on quarterbacks this season. The one thing though is we are graduating 3 players from this defensive line, and we really lack pass rushers. One guy to keep your eye on though is Jesse Shaw, a red-shirted guy who was in our recruiting class last year, who has some nice speed and has some nice pass rushing moves. Greg Covington is our #1 target in this class. We have a pretty substantial deficit right now, but he is visiting at 6'8", 275. He is a huge human being, and he's also out of Pullman. He moves very, very well, not only for his size, but for really anyone, and also has some very nice pass rushing moves. Anthony Gray, a guy who, if he did come to us, would likely sit for a couple of years and redshirt. He moves pretty well, not the strongest guy, and would just need some time to develop. Also a pretty good hitter. Ryan Hayes, a 6'4", 283 guy we're looking at out of Michigan. Once again, just sort of a backup guy that we were looking at. The interior of the defensive line has definitely been a strength. Robert Barber has had a breakout season this year. Maurice Chris is a guy who will be graduating next year, but we have some nice talent under him to replace him. Ryan Branch, though, is our recruit. A little undersized at 6 foot, but at that 6 foot stature, he is incredibly strong. Does not move very well, but has some pass rushing moves to get to the quarterback inside. Something very nice to see, and also a very hard hitter who takes good angles on his tackles. 4 guys that we are just sort of looking at and keeping an eye on moving forward in case Ryan Branch decides that we are not where he wants to go are those 4 that you saw. At linebacker, this is probably our most talented and deepest position. The only issue is we're graduating all 3 starters in our linebacking core and 6 linebackers total. We have some nice guys who can step in next year, but the biggest key will be getting depth behind them. Alex Dixon, a 251 linebacker out of Virginia. We have a very nice lead on him, as he is a guy who can get off the line like few others in his class. He also has some very nice strength to him, hits very hard, uses that strength very well, and recognizes plays very well. Eric Sykes, you may be looking and seeing a 1-star prospect, but keep in mind at 6'5", he has the size I look for in my linebackers, along with 88 speed and 92 acceleration. This dude is just a physical specimen. The rest of his game is not caught quite up with his physical intangibles. Eric Ford, Jerome Watson, and Eric Underwood are a couple of other guys we're looking at. Eric Underwood, another 6'5" guy who could be a guy if Sykes does not commit to us. Raymond Barber inside of the middle linebacker spot. He is leaning pretty heavily towards UCLA. He's more of a run stopper, as his coverage skills are not quite up to his pass rushing skills or even his block shedding skills, so he would definitely be more of a run stopper. Our secondary is probably one of our biggest weaknesses, as the last 2 years our secondary has really been torched, especially our cornerbacks. It's a very young unit, however, with 6 players, and none of them will be gone next year, so you just have to count on them developing. But Marcel Stewart could be an impact guy into our secondary at 6'3", incredibly fast and great coverage ratings for an incoming freshman, and also uses his side very effectively to press as an 86 overall. Moving to the back end of our secondary, Taylor Taliulu has really struggled in his 2 years in Pullman. Replacing him next year will be Isaac Dotson, Suleiman Hamid, or even David Buchanan. Darius Lamore will be back for his senior year, and he has played very well. I would say he has been burned a couple of times. But now our prospects, Daryl King, another guy out of South Carolina, only 6 foot, not the biggest guy, but he has some nice range. His coverage skills are pretty average, nothing really that great, but very athletic and definitely can cover that deep coverage that you need. George Evans, another guy on the back end, a little taller at 6'1", out of California. He's leaning very heavily towards us. We might be able to get him after this week and his visit. 84 speed, a pretty hard hitter, okay in coverage. He's definitely going to have to work on that. But overall, I am very happy with how this recruiting class is coming together. I feel like it could be definitely a very solid recruiting class. But I am very excited moving forward in this series. This should be a very interesting game against Cal. Hopefully one that we can pull off and become bowl eligible. But I hope you did enjoy. If you're excited for some of these recruits, leave a like down below. Leave your comments on who you think we've got to get for this team down below. I will see you against Cal, because I'm out.